Hey guys, this is the Create or Die podcast.
Wahoo!
Welcome. And today we are going to talk about a very important topic, a very relevant topic in our lives. We're going to talk about school. And we have a special guest coming later on, so stay tuned for that. But other than that, we're going to catch up with you guys. So how has your what did you guys get up to this week?
This week, I went hiking. I saw a herd of goats.
Oh yeah. Wait,
Yeah.
we should introduce ourselves.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so sorry guys, I forgot to introduce myself, but I am Jasmine. I will be the host today. I go by she, her, and we'll pass it on to Angeli.
My name is Angeli. I'm also here. My pronouns are she, her. My favorite color is green.
Wow.
That's so important, guys.
Yeah, that's such a
Do you want to also add on your favorite color?
Yeah.
Wait, what's
Oh,
this
no,
though?
say something like,
Yeah.
what would you reincarnate as? Say that.
Why are we bringing
Yeah, guys, we always
Okay.
say something different.
I'm Maya. I go by she, her, and I would reincarnate as Arctic fox or something.
Oh.
Ooh.
Hi, my name is Lacoris. I go by she, they. Do I? What would I reincarnate
Oh,
as?
he
Or do I
also
say
added
like
Name your
all of
favorite animal.
my favorite animal?
Amazing
I like
questions.
cats.
Cat.
I am Spider. I go by he, him. What's my question?
What if
Oh,
what
Angela's so good at
tree
this.
do you like the most?
What tree do I like?
Yeah, what type of tree?
Birch trees. They look weird.
Like in Minecraft?
They just look no.
Yeah.
No, in
Yeah,
real life,
Minecraft.
outside.
Go
He's
What?
been-
Or I like the jungle biome better, but
The new biome.
And the new
The pink one.
the pink one. The
There's
pink
a
one.
new- there's a new
biome. The pink
biome.
one.
wait,
Anaya.
actually,
Wait.
My name is Anaya. I go by she, her pronouns, and
What's your favorite Minecraft biome?
I don't play Minecraft.
Oh.
you
Yeah.
ew, disgusting.
That is a lame question.
Okay, what's your favorite soda?
My favorite
Yeah.
soda? Honestly, any soda.
That's
Okay,
a
no,
really
but
thick one.
Chris,
Really?
Nestle,
Any
Um,
soda.
Red Bull.
You have no preference?
No,
That's not a soda, is it? You don't.
It's
you
an
wouldn't
energy
prefer-
drink, no?
Is it
But I like
carbonated?
Coke.
Yeah.
Okay, there,
It's
that's
like
okay.
Coke.
Yeah.
So do you guys have anything fun to share about this week or anything you've been up
You went
to?
hiking, right? Angela?
Yeah, I did.
Angeli went hiking. She
mountain.
saw a whole bunch of goats.
Yeah, it
She's
was
mentioned many
fun.
times now.
Yes.
Is
and I
that
saw
why
a
you want to
spider.
reincarnate as a goat?
Yeah, because
Really?
I saw it and it was so cool. Like these goats, they have like the big horns, right? And they
Wow,
travel on
mountain
back.
goat.
Like I want to be a part of something like that.
Yeah.
Like it'd be
Okay.
fun. Plus you look intimidating.
Other than Angeli, anybody else?
Yeah. What have
I
you
got
guys?
new face metal.
Face
Face metal?
Really hurts.
Oh yeah, which
Oh,
one?
dang.
Snake
Ooh.
bites.
Ooh, cute.
Oh,
Those are good.
That's crazy.
Rate
With-
the pain tolerance, like
Oh yeah,
on a
that's yeah.
scale 1 to 10.
It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Like a 6 out of 10. This one hurt a lot more.
Oh.
Was it the
Yeah.
second one? Yeah, the second one always hurts more.
It's also more bruised because my
Oh,
ears are screwed up a little bit. but
I'm a fan of piercings. I don't like the healing process. It hurts. Like
I
when
always
it
forget
heals.
whenever I get a piercing that I have to heal after.
yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I love how I look and I love how this looks, but I can't eat. I can't talk.
For like 4 months, you're like, I can't do anything.
Yeah, and it
so
yeah,
true.
but
Yeah, since this is our second podcast, second podcast. What did you guys thinking about last week's podcast for whoever was here? I think everyone was here.
For a
These
little
two
bit.
came
Yeah,
late,
yeah,
for a little bit.
but like, what was the experience? How did it feel? You know, like, were you guys nervous? I know I was definitely nervous, but coming into this podcast, what are you guys, thinking about?
I'm slightly less nervous, still nervous, but like
Yeah.
Yeah,
whatever, it'll be fine.
I mean, last week you were host.
Yeah, that was not
Yeah.
fun.
So, we are gonna talk about our topic, which is school. I'm sure we all have a lot to say about school, whether good or bad. So, what do you guys think about school, like in general? What are your opinions? Hot
So,
takes.
That's so like mundane. Like I have to just keep doing it over and over and over again. Like,
Mm-hmm. And then I know for us, we graduate next year, right?
yeah.
So I feel like there's a lot more pressure towards that. And And I know you dropped out of school.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
I ended up dropping out in grade 10.
Oh yeah,
Fair.
when can you
But
drop out? Grade 10, right?
You can drop out
After
anytime.
after you're
You can stop
16,
going.
After
I
you're
think that's
16?
the rule.
Oh.
I did end up completely stop going to school when I was about 15, but
Oh dang. Yeah. Was that during COVID? Sort of?
it was yeah. It was
Yeah.
the year
I feel
after
like during
COVID.
that time there was a lot going on.
School was a lot
An
different.
adjustment.
Mhm.
It
I
was
found
a
it
big
hard to get,
adjustment
like-
to make it worse. I went to a new school as well,
Oh,
Right.
and I didn't know
Oh.
anybody, so that was
Dang.
yeah.
I
That-
found
that
it
is-
hard to get back into school after COVID.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know about you, I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
it was like it was hard to get back into like, oh, I have to sit in a classroom for like
Yeah.
8 hours and
Right.
like
It was
Yeah.
like really hard
Like,
socializing, and you know how schools they
Yeah,
force
so-
you to socialize, like
Mhm.
sitting plan
like
and
the
all.
first day where it's like say 2 truths and a lie or something. It's so
Exactly. It's
bad.
annoying.
I feel like it's
too.
such like an interesting environment because on one hand, I feel like there's people who like want to go there just to socialize, and then
Yeah.
there's obviously the learning aspect, but then there's also people who don't want to socialize.
they just want to
right? Where
learn.
You just
Yeah.
feel like
Wait, can we all
fit
say
in.
what grade we're in or like what's
Yeah,
our what's
yeah,
our
yeah,
school
yeah.
status just
Okay.
for
Yeah.
clarification?
So Jasmine, I'm going to grade 12. Yeah.
I'm Angela. Oh, that's to say my name
Okay.
again?
I
No,
don't
you
know,
don't
I
just
don't
like
know
your
why I said my
grade.
name.
I'm
Like what
go-
grade you're going into.
Going into grade 12.
Going to grade 12.
Clarify. Going into grade 11.
I graduated recently, so
Yeah. And you're going to take a gap year, hey?
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, for post secondary. Before
yeah.
that, I'm taking a gap year.
What are you
So-
studying?
In post secondary.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to go for either like sociology or anthropology, but let's see.
Mm.
Sociology's
cool.
good, yeah.
Wait, anthropology? Isn't that like dinosaurs?
It's about human evolution.
humans.
I thought it was bugs.
It's like
That's
evolution.
paleontology.
I thought that was
No.
the study of like, I
Wait,
thought
what?
it was dinosaurs.
Yeah.
My bad.
My parents did that.
But it's also like studies about
No.
origin of cultures and all that. It's
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
evolution.
But going back to school during COVID, because I feel like that's like quite the experience. Like, what's your
Yeah.
guys' take on like how that went? Like, I know Spider, you're like talking about how like you didn't do anything.
Yeah, I have a really hard time. I have probably ADHD. We're getting a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So I really need to be sitting down in a separate space. Not sitting
Yeah.
down, but like I need to be in a different space.
Right.
And I need to have somebody there directly to help me.
Mhm.
I found it very hard to socialize because I just got into middle school, I think,
Mhm.
and it was a new middle school that nobody from my old school was going
Yeah.
to. So then, like halfway through that, they're like, you can't sit like in the same classroom." My school didn't do COVID very
Oh,
well, like at all.
Okay. Do you feel
Mm.
like they accommodated for you at all, or no?
No,
There was a
It
lack
was very-
thereof.
And I feel like also the problem was my school didn't count. Your grade couldn't go down. Like they
Uh-huh.
paused your grade, so you didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
like
Wait,
they just paused.
actually?
Yeah, they paused your grade, and then the year after
Like,
that, it
that's-
was like.
that's kind of lucky.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie.
But then you go in. I went into grade 8 knowing nothing because I learned nothing, and then they spent most of 8th grade doing catch up. And
True.
I feel like my school didn't handle it very well, like
Wow.
at all, because there was no accountability, and I learned nothing, and then it was all catch up, and then it
Yeah,
was
for
terrible.
me, I went to a really small school, like tiny, like it was a K to 9. There's like one class per grade, right? But I don't know, it was also a very academic school. So I feel like when I was there, it was like, I don't know, I put a lot of pressure on myself to learn during that time, but then I felt like I put too much pressure on myself to learn. I don't know, because I was like, I gotta get good grades and stuff, even though I'm still, in the pandemic, whatever. But that was like my perspective on it.
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
the same experience as Spider as well when we were in grade 8. That halfway through or whatever, that's when they paused our grades. So I had honor roll and I didn't do a single thing. And so I was telling me, I was like, oh, you have grade. And I didn't do anything for grade 8, grade 9. And then grade 10, they were like, oh, it's just catch up year. And so now we went to a grade 11. And then they were like, okay, we're giving you the full curriculum now. And I didn't do
Yeah.
it for any school
Oh.
for like 3 years straight. And so I feel like that was definitely a change for me.
Yeah, definitely a shift, right?
I in grade 8, I was one of those kids who kept doing it because it was like the only way I could like maintain like my routine. Otherwise, I was like,
Right.
yeah, I thought I would be going like insane or something because I'm just sitting there and I didn't know what to do for half the time.
Yeah, I just didn't feel. I felt bad, like not being
Exactly.
productive.
Yeah, I
know?
felt
Yeah,
like I was like,
because-
if I'm gonna stay here, I'm just gonna might as well do something or
I
something.
mean, during quarantine, everyone had like a really, repetitive
different, yeah.
routine, and it was
Yeah, it was
hard,
just-
changing
It was
that.
hard.
and it was just staying inside a lot was like
Exactly.
a
I
big
I feel like it takes
change.
a lot of like I don't know, independence and discipline. It depends on the person too.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
your own like habits and stuff like
Mhm.
that.
I also feel like if you had like an established friend group, like it wasn't like it was
Oh,
still
right.
bad,
Yeah.
but like
It was
I
a little
had
bit-
nobody like
no
one
like
to,
nobody like I
go
just
to,
would talk to
right?
my mom all day, and that would be
Right,
that was it.
yeah.
Like that was the only
Oh
person
my
I
God,
talked
that
to.
was so true.
And like my mental health like crashed because it was just if you didn't have an
Yeah.
established support group.
Yeah,
I don't know what that
yeah.
was. Support group. Then like you didn't have anything because even if school is like hard, I found it like it was. You had to sit down and talk to people, like even
Right.
if the people you didn't like or whatever, you still had to socialize.
Yeah, I
and stuff.
definitely know my mental health crashed during that
Yeah.
time. That was a tough time. Like you were balancing school, you're balancing your mental health, you're balancing I don't know things at home.
Mhm.
It was just like a lot.
What about
yeah.
you?
Obviously, like there was online school for a little bit. I went to like 2 classes, just 'cause it was,
Fair.
school didn't really like during lockdown. I didn't really pay attention to anything school related.
Mhm.
Lockdown was actually when I established myself as an artist,
Yeah, that's
and when
crazy.
I like became when art became like an outlet to me.
Mhm.
But it was also a really like tough time. It was for everybody, but
yeah.
the isolation was really bad. I had like
Yeah.
no friends.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of like in my room making beats all day.
Damn.
We super honest before.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of like a lot of artists I've been listening to lately, they all like started they started releasing music during COVID.
Well, like, cause
Like the
that's
bottom
like the
line.
most free time anyone's had.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Like you're stuck in your house all day. Like what else can you do?
yeah.
That's when I
know?
really started drawing too.
Yeah.
Like, because you had nothing to do all day, so I feel like a lot of people.
Yeah, you
One of the
exchange
good
that
things
for
was people
school.
had more free time. Even if
Yeah.
it was
Mhm.
Artists
Self-discoveries.
liked quarantine a little bit more
but
than
like a little bit.
little tiny bit
We were
more.
like, ooh, this is nice.
It was like
Okay.
a blessing and a curse a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we've touched not briefly, we kind of talked about it for a while, but now that we've touched on school, we're going to introduce our special guest today. We have Donna Simon. She is a retired school teacher, and she's been teaching for over 3 decades, I think, of experience. So let's welcome her, everybody. Woo! Hey, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh, well, I'm primarily an elementary school teacher. I've taught for just over 30 years. The
Wow,
time went
that's-
really fast. It truly did.
Wow, That's amazing.
Yeah, I love teaching. It's what I've
Mhm.
always wanted to do since I
Yeah.
was probably 8 years old.
Wow.
So
That's cool. You knew what you wanted to do like when you were younger, and then you just went for it.
absolutely, I have 2 younger sisters, and I remember being 8 and chasing them down and making them sit and take reading lessons from me.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Adorable.
So-
I remember doing
Teacher from
something
the
like that,
start.
like
Yeah.
talking to
Exactly.
like teddy bears or stuffies.
Exactly.
And,
I
like,
used to teach my
pretending.
stuffies. So yeah, always wanted to
definitely.
do it. Very, very happy to have been able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
that's
been awesome.
That's amazing. So what has those like 30 years been like? And I know you said it went by really fast. Like what did that feel like?
Yeah, it did. The first 5 years for teachers are always the hardest. And I think that's true in any career that you go into.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really hard in teaching because there's no mentoring, there's no support. You're just thrown into a classroom after you graduate,
Right.
and you're expected to do what, teachers with 30 years of experience do.
Right.
So, yeah, the first 5 years are tough. right now we lose about 50% of teachers in the first 5 years
Oh, really?
because they just don't have the support that they need.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I noticed this at my own school, but like I noticed like a lot of young teachers will come into this, and there's a lot of like older, more experienced
Mhm.
teachers there, but then they take up like a very small percentage of like the school's teachers, whatever. But then they'll just like leave. And the thing is, I love those teachers so much because they're like they just bring up the energy and like they have like
Yeah.
a different sort
They
of
have a freshness,
Yeah.
they have new approaches,
Yeah.
they're closer in age often to the students they
Yeah.
have. So that makes a huge difference. So one of the things I
Mhm.
did a lot of in my career was I had like over 25 student teachers, because then you can
wow.
support those young teachers and they stay in the
Mhm.
profession.
Right.
And when you don't have that support, it's a tough job to do on the first
Mm.
day. Just make it happen.
I thought
Wow.
that was a standard process that like I thought that all teachers had to go through like the assistant teacher thing. Like that's
Yeah.
how I thought it.
Yeah, you do
Work.
out of university. So when
Oh.
you're in university, you have to do some student teaching.
Mhm.
But I think what we really need in education is we need mentoring. We need when the
Right.
young teachers are coming in, we need to be able to release the more experienced teachers to be able to mentor those brand new teachers for at least a first couple of years, so we don't lose them, because a lot of them struggle. And the mentors can make a massive difference.
Right.
Yeah.
So how has school changed over the years? And like what do you think about like the course of like so many generations? Like 30 years is a lot.
It is
It's
a
like
long time,
yeah.
and it's massive. It's huge, the changes we've had.
Mm.
And unfortunately, I don't think they're for the better. I really don't.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when I first started, we had as teachers a lot of supports. We
Mhm.
had educational assistants, we had classes and specialists that could support kids who were struggling.
Right, right.
We
right.
had a lot of programming that was focused on diversity, and we think that we're that way now, but we're truly
Mhm.
not.
Wow, that's crazy to think that, because I feel like I know my mom, she works in like diversity and inclusion, like sort of that's
Right.
her sector, and I feel like I've been seeing a lot of like big companies, for example, like Nike, like oh they're bringing
Right.
in diversity and inclusion. Like I feel like I don't know, this is just my perspective, surface level, but I thought it was like going like up.
Well,
sort
and
of.
it is in terms of things like advertising and
Mm.
maybe opportunities.
Yeah.
But for me in education, because we had so many supports, like we had psychologists, we had psychiatrists, in a classroom, if children had particular needs, there were people who could come in and support them.
Right.
What's happened now is we've lost our ed assistants for hugely. I've been in
Mm.
schools where we have 700 kids and 2 educational assistants.
Wow.
I mean, they do their best, but what can you do?
The numbers are
Our psychologists have gone down, our special education programs are
Mhm.
gone. So what happens is, we can have bigger and bigger class sizes have also happened. So you can have 35 kids in a class with one
Mhm.
teacher, and there's all kinds of needs, and
Mhm.
there's just no support. And so teachers are overwhelmed in a huge way, and we're not
Wow.
allowed to speak that to the public or to put that out there. But, there's teachers at the end of the day in tears because they can't reach their kids and they're
Yeah.
trying so hard, but there's just no support.
I think that's really interesting, because I feel like as students, not knowing that our own teachers don't have support,
Yeah.
that definitely reflects our own lack of support. So
And it does. It
Yeah.
does. Absolutely. You know what? And a lot of people just assume teachers know how to do every job, right? But in a classroom, you can have kids who have severe mental needs, physical needs, emotional needs, psychological needs, and then learning needs.
Right.
And we're expected to just deal with that whole gambit, often, with little to no support.
Yeah. Do you guys feel like you can kind of relate to the aspect where there's a lack of support?
So like
And-
I have a really good experience, which I think more people should have. In 8th grade, I had like a really, really good teacher. And I was having mental health problems at the time, and he noticed and he gave me so much support. Like he'd
Yeah.
sit with me at
You talked
lunch.
about this last time,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
lovely
yeah.
teacher. He would sit with me at lunch. He'd talk to me after school. Like he would make sure everything was okay. He got
Yeah.
me into therapy, and like that is so it is so like heartbreaking that people don't get that more, because teachers are so overworked. Like there are so many kids who I thought like could need that, but like the amount of effort it takes to like do that for a child is like insane, and like there's so many people who need it and like not enough.
And
space
that's
to
what
give it.
teachers want to do for kids.
Yeah.
Like every teacher who's in the classroom, they want to be there for every student. And so, you know, we give it our best, but you know, it's there's too many things that pull us away from the kids and away from teaching. You know, too many projects and initiatives and things and paperwork and testing and endless things like that. And it pulls us away from where we want to be, which is where the kids are. And then there's too many kids, there's too much complexity without any support.
Yeah, which I would like want to go back to your point about diversity. Like I've seen that diversity is welcomed a lot, but diverse thoughts are not. Like how you said that teachers want to do that, and when they try like expressing that they have a certain goal, if they're like, you know, perceptions differ from the ones that are in charge, it will be really hard to get through, right?
And that's from the students to the teacher, but also from the teacher sometimes to administration or to upper, you know, where we as teachers want to do things with our kids that we know are going to help, and where we can be, you know, told, no, you can't do that. You've got to follow this path or that path. And we're the ones who work with the kids every day. We know these kids, and we're not given that autonomy to sometimes do what we know is best for the kids that we have, because there's all these political pressures and, you know, board pressures and different things. So it can be hard. I mean, teaching can be an amazing job. It truly can be, and you can really have a massive impact in people's lives. But I find as the years have gone on, it's become harder and harder to do that, because we're fighting so much bureaucracy and so much, you know, top down kinds of things going on.
I was thinking about how, like, you know, when you grow up like in like a school institution or whatever, you definitely see like teachers as like role models, as like, you know, a figure in your life. And I just feel like, is there definitely had that sort of teacher figure in your life, but like how important do you think is like?
Oh, I think that's huge,
It is.
because, you know, for a lot of kids, they will spend more time with their teacher than any other adult, including their parents, in their life.
Really?
Like,
Wow.
like
that
for,
actually makes sense.
for a lot of our kids, you know, I know at parent-teacher interviews and things, like I'm often saying things to parents that they have no idea about their kids. And so we do become that almost parental figure, that person, you know. And I've had that in my life. When I was in grade 11, I went through some quite difficult mental health things, and I had a teacher who, as you said, you know, took me out to lunch and had conversations with me, and she was wonderful and did amazing things. So that personal interaction is huge. It's absolutely huge. And that's sometimes what teachers fight for, because we're overwhelmed by all this stuff that we have to do.
other things.
And we're trying to have connections with kids.
Yeah. You guys feel like you've had or
Or a lack of is
lack
also
of,
some.
Yeah. So that can
Either
happen too.
or.
I say it's definitely important, but I've definitely had a lack of. I had some pretty poor teachers for like a lot of years. Like they were like very like bullies to some students that were in classes with me, and it's like they like to call out a lot of students. I just feel like it was like you're coming to this place and you're already like uncomfortable because like it's school, maybe it's not your favorite thing, and you have people who are supposedly your parental figures because you spend so much time around them, and they're very negative to some of these students, and I think it's very
And like, who
damaging.
can blame them? Like, I feel like not that it's excusable, and like they shouldn't be doing that. But when you're teaching 35 kids, and you like, obviously you're not gonna like you should support every kid that comes into it, but obviously you're not gonna like all of them. And the percentage of kids that you have to deal with, like, of course you're gonna get frustrated. And like kids get more annoying in higher numbers. I feel like the more that there are, you're like, just please, like they're so stressed and they're so like there's absolutely no support of like they might take it out on the kids, which like they shouldn't be doing, but like that's
And like
know?
any profession, I mean, you have people who are really good and people who aren't. So, that makes me sad to hear that, but I have seen that as well. The other stressor we have too, though, is the way that education is going right now. There's this idea that teachers and classrooms should fix everything in society. So, let's have teachers, help kids with mental health, and let's have teachers, help kids with everything. And so when you're trying to teach and you have a curriculum that you have to get through, and then you've got a large class, and then you've got massive diversity in that class,
right,
and you don't have support, and then, the government is saying, yeah, let's have teachers, do this and this and this and this. And so it's kind of like all of society is waiting for teachers to solve every societal problem for children there are, without talking about, well, what about the role of parents? What about the role of, healthcare? What about these other roles? So it can get quite overwhelming.
So do you feel like if teachers are getting less support these days compared to back then, like, has that probably like impacted our generation?
Oh, definitely.
Different from other generations?
I would say yes, because when I first started teaching, we could send kids to small, short-term specialized programs.
Right.
We had aides. We could bring in psychologists. We had, healthcare workers who would come into the classroom. We had therapists, like occupational therapists and people like that. So we could get to kids what they needed, and we could support them. And I feel like, and I know I hesitate to say it, but I feel like parents were more involved too. Like, you could call up the parents and bring them in, and we were a team together working with the kids.
Right.
Whereas now, it's not that way so much. Like, there's not the supports to call in, there's not the supports in schools, and sometimes when you call in parents, there's no support there either. So I feel like we can't give you guys what you deserve individually, because there's just not the time, the resources, the supports.
I feel
to
like
do
that's really, really eye-opening to know.
It's sad because a lot of teachers go home at night and cry because they just they're so frustrated that they can't reach the kids they're trying to reach, because there's just not enough of them to go around.
I remember, like, that teacher was trying to get me a school-appointed therapist or whatever. I don't know what they're called, counselor, whatever, but, like, somebody to talk to through school, and it would be, like, 6 weeks. And then I specifically was trying to get a gender therapist, but you need, like, parental consent and everything, so it would have had to have outed me to my parents, and there was so many, like, layers to things.
Well, that's the thing, like, the bureaucracy is often what gets in our way doing things, because you want to do something for a child and you got to go through 87 hoops and to try and do that with 35 kids. So it can, and I don't want to make teaching sound like a bad job, because I absolutely love teaching.
Right.
And one of the reasons I took early retirement, was that frustration that the bureaucracy of it and the lack of supports in it was getting to be so large between me and what I wanted to do for the kids. I would have taught for another 10 years easily.
Right.
I love working with kids, but you're just crushed down by all of that, to the point where it just overwhelms us.
Right.
And I know many teachers who retired early, and that is their issue. It's not that they don't want to be with the kids. It's that the structure of it has become so difficult.
And then I feel like on the other end, if we're on the receiving end of that, then there's a lot that comes out of that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And I also feel like our generation, like, I feel like our generation's like just evolving, like, at like have to deal with so many things at such like a rapid pace, right? Especially like social media, mental health, all these things that like can be detrimental to
also,
somebody.
I feel like there's not an ability for, like, me to go get a school counselor. Like, I don't know how to do that, so then you have to go through the teacher.
Yeah.
Like, there also isn't support for a kid to be like, oh, I need this. Oh, I'm going to go talk to my principal. So then it all falls on the teacher, which is like another layer of, like, you need students to be able to have a route to advocate for themselves so that the teachers don't have to do it.
When I started work, every, junior high and high school had a counselor, and kids could just go and make an appointment and see the counselor. That's unheard of now. We don't have those supports.
We have counselors at my school, but like, no offense to them, they're probably very overworked. No offense to them.
That's so
They're
true.
not
questionable.
No,
Yeah.
they're questionable. They're way overworked. I'm sure they're just doing paperwork for other teachers. They're not actually there to help the kids. They're there to do
Yeah.
excess things that the
I
teachers
feel like there's
can't.
like a lot of side jobs that you have to take
Well, there are.
on.
There's so many. Like there's our job used to be teach, and now our job is teach and 12 other things, plus the teach. And so you don't, again, you can't focus where you want to put the focus, which is on the kids.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really sad considering like teachers can have a huge impact on their students, and it's like they're
Absolutely.
so burdened by other stuff, and
Yeah, and you can still have that impact. Like there's teachers give 150%. That's just who we are. And so teachers, even in really different circumstances, will just put out every single thing they can to reach kids. And you see the impact that you have.
yeah,
It's
I
just-
personally had like such great teachers, and I owe it to them that they like helped me a lot with so much stuff. So it's like so nice.
And you do have that impact, and it's a beautiful thing.
It is.
It's just, I personally, and this is just me personally, I do think that has gotten more and more difficult to do over the years because of the way education has been structured and underfunded and undervalued sometimes too. But you still go in every day wanting to be there for every kid and make a difference, right?
What are like the 3 things you would like change? Like top 3, because I'm sure you have a big list.
My top 3, right off the bat, I would take out several layers of upper and middle management and school boards and use that money to put an educational assistant in every classroom. Because even just having 2 people in a classroom can make a massive difference, So that would be my number 1. I would take a serious look at curriculum, which is what we are legislated to teach, because in some places it's become almost a thing to change the curriculum every 2 or 3 years, and nobody ever asks the teachers. Like all of that is done at a higher level.
It's all done at a very high level.
With people who often have never been or were in a classroom decades
have that
ago.
experience. Yeah.
And if they were to ask us, who are with the kids every day, what do you as teachers think should be in the curriculum?
Right.
We could make it meaningful.
Right.
We could make it work. Where we're never consulted. We're just told, and we often will look at it and go, this isn't going to work. I can already tell you that, but we have to do it anyway. So that'd be my number 2. Number 3, I think, would be getting rid of massive amounts of the paperwork that we do. I feel like the job has become 60% paperwork and 40% teaching, and I'm not exactly sure what that paperwork accomplishes. Like it's just, it seems to be filling out things to put into files that then don't necessarily seem to go anywhere, and that takes away from being able to work with the kids. So those would be my top 3.
I don't really want to get political here.
No,
but
no. And I'm trying not to also.
No. But like for me, I was a part of this sort of we're gonna raise awareness around, at the time it was like the Alberta government was inputting this curriculum, and there's a lot of like racist stuff in there.
Yeah, that was
and
brain wreck of a
yeah, and I remember just being so angry about it. I know that some of it, like I think it went forward with it.
Well, it has, and I mean it's common knowledge in the education circles that the Alberta Teachers Association and teachers do not support the current Alberta curriculum.
Yeah.
And we have asked to have input into it because we have not, as teachers, been asked. We have some very serious concerns about the new curriculum.
Do you feel like if students ever had a say like on the curriculum, like
brilliant?
Yeah, like if you guys
we need
had
that.
Something, if you could change the curriculum, what would you change?
I feel like, okay, so this is gonna sound weird. I feel like sometimes the speed of the curriculum
Yeah,
is
the
too
pace,
fast for me.
right?
Like, if I had the option to be like, oh, you do like an extra year of school, but everything goes a little bit slower, I would
Absolutely.
absolutely jump on that.
Right,
Of, like,
right.
And teachers
yeah.
100% agree with you. Our number one issue with curriculums, and that has gotten worse and worse over the years, is that we keep pushing down higher and higher concepts to lower and lower grades and going faster and faster. And so if you're going to, it's almost impossible to properly teach the curriculum
Yes.
because we're just going too fast. And we have said that for decades, and we can't seem to get a
I
change
just
to that.
noticed in like during math, like I took like math
it's
20,
crazy.
math 20-1, and I just remember thinking like, how is this even like possible? Like I have to go home and study for like a good like, I don't know, like 3 hours just to get it all, like just to process all that in my brain.
Absolutely.
And then do a quiz the next day.
Yeah.
Like I actually don't understand like how that's humanly possible. And I also feel like people who do excel at school or like high school are people who can like learn really fast, like on the spot. And I'm just not that type of person. My
and
learning
most
style
aren't.
is different.
Most aren't. And that's a massive frustration for teachers as well. Like we look at the curriculum, even in the younger grades, and go, this is double what should be here.
Right. If you guys could change anything in the curriculum, what would you change?
Definitely like speed.
Yeah.
A lot more. Like this all goes back to what we were talking about earlier, but like more
Support.
because it's really hard to like, you know, as a teacher support every single kid and like get all their needs in check and stuff, and you know, but
I feel like as students, we definitely crave that support, especially in a learning environment and like a growing environment where you're growing with kids, you're growing with other people, different types of people, you know, people of all different needs. I definitely feel like my experience in like middle school, like just, you know, having friends who like, you know, didn't have that support at home.
Yes.
And then seeing teachers trying to, you know, accommodate for them, but then at the same time there's just like, I don't know, there's just a lot lacking, and it was just a lot. Yeah.
It is. And one of the things that we do, because, you know, teachers do try to say, all right, this is our reality. What can we do within it? You know, so it's a lot of trying to do project work and trying to do things that let kids have a lot of different entry points into it, things like that, you know, so that the kids can find their niche, their way, and show you what they know, even if it's not in a paper and pencil way or if it's not in a more traditional way. And so we do come up with a lot of ideas and a lot of concepts and try to work together as teachers to address the issues, because we do want to make that difference and we do want to help kids.
Right.
And so teachers are some very highly creative people because we've got a lot to cover,
right.
And a lot of pressures, but we are constantly brainstorming ways of, okay, so how can we make this work?
Yeah.
What about you? Well, if you had to change something on the curriculum, what would it be?
Well, there's a lot of like, you have to memorize, do the test, and then you forget right away. I feel like it's kind of like 12 years is kind of pretty pointless if you're learning it just for that short period of time. Like I feel like it's so like I'm learning information, and whether it's good or not, it's so irrelevant because I'm not gonna memorize it or like remember the next day after the test. Like, and there's a lot of like, I go into school on the first day and they're like, we're already behind, and I know they could say it as a joke, but like it's so true that we're already behind on the first day, and then they're putting so much pressure on like all the schoolwork that we have to do when they could just like teach us a little less and then we'll learn more. Like,
and we would love to do that, and we're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, I know.
And so I know the kids are going like, slow it down, and in our minds we're going, I wish I could, but then we're mandated, you know, by the government to get through all of this. So you have the pressure of both sides. But as teachers, and this is another reason why if we were asked about curriculum, we totally agree with you that this just memorizing and spewing it out is a waste of time. I mean, you can go on the internet now and discover all of that in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So what you need to learn is how to learn. and you need to learn life skills. And we totally agree with you on
life
that.
skills, yeah.
And we aren't asked for input on that. But if we were, we would completely agree with you there.
I feel like that's really good to hear because
Mm-hmm.
just based on my experiences, because I do have like learning disabilities. I need special needs and stuff. I feel like I started to resent a lot of my teachers, but speaking with you, really not your fault. It just sounds like this higher up.
Well, there's a
Yeah.
lot because there's 20 layers above us. And so, we totally understand that as students, you're looking at us and going, you're ruining my life and making me crazy. But we have, I think people would be surprised to see how little control we actually have over, things like curriculum and pacing and sometimes even strategies, like teaching strategies that we might know work, but we're told, yeah, no, you have to do it this way or that way. And so I think that's something that as teachers, it's hard to get out there because we're not allowed to come out and speak out about those things. And so there's often a misconception that we are making those things happen.
Right.
And we can make a lot happen, but a lot we can't do anything about.
So what are some 3 things that you guys would want to change, like about school, your experience with school? Yeah. Somebody go for it.
I can go. I would definitely want like more engagement within the community. I feel like there are like clubs for that, but I think if you want to learn life skills, you need to engage with your community.
I 100% agree.
You can't memorize
Wait, so
it.
you mean like out of school?
Yes.
Like doing like actual like experiencing
Yes,
things.
exactly.
Yeah,
Not
that's
just like,
true.
memorizing it and
Like being able to apply that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be brilliant.
I know.
I went to a science school where for like middle school where that was what they were trying to. COVID got in the way, but for the first like 4 months, we would go on field trips like once a week and it was really involved in the community. And I thought that was like really lovely, and it's like terrible that that's not every school. Like my school was one of the ones that was said to be ahead of the
Science?
curve or whatever.
Isn't it like a science school?
Yeah, now it's called. Oh, actually, I don't want to.
Yeah,
Never
yeah.
mind. Never mind. But no, it was really good. And I was told that it was ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Like the whole school was like, oh, we're the new
Quirky.
education.
And there
You're
are
like,
initiatives like that where we're trying to get kids out of the classroom and into the community. But as you say, it's not equal across quadrants of the city or for every child, but that's the ideal.
Why is that? Like why is it like I mean it does have to do with
Socioeconomic
yes
ties into it somewhat.
definitely.
And that's not just with that. That's with
Right.
everything. Like some schools will have more resources than others.
That's very true.
And then schools will have budgets that are given to them. And, within the school, often the administration or people will make decisions. And so where funds go, might depend on who's running the school or who's running the school board.
Like
And where their priorities lie. So that's something that would be very helpful, I think, is if we could find those programs that are really powerful and put them across the board, as opposed to people being able to manipulate that a bit more.
I'm assuming not, but do the teachers have a say in like administrative decisions? I'm assuming not, but like.
Well, it depends on the school. It depends on the administrator. In some schools, yes. In other schools, not so much. So that becomes, can be an issue for sure.
Your 2 others.
Yeah, your 2 others.
Sorry,
yeah.
we cut you. We went on a whole tangent.
No, it's just like my major one was the one that I just mentioned, and the other would be like having mental health resources more accessible. Like you will see people in school doing stuff, but it still doesn't feel accessible. It just feels like someone speaking but not really understanding what's going on,
That's a major concern.
Yeah.
It really is.
probably my number one is like shrinking class sizes. 35
Yes.
is insane.
Yeah.
That's insane.
40
And
is
that
bad.
part of that is more infrastructure. Like we need more room for class sizes. Part of that is teachers are dropping like flies.
Yeah.
Either they're retiring early or they're just stopping or they're not getting past those
Yeah.
5 years. Like they're dropping. Like there's so many reasons of just like
Mhm.
like one teacher cannot possibly properly teach 35 children. Cannot possibly, like 20 is a stretch, you know, like you can't connect with those kids. You can't like, you know,
Yeah.
like there's way too many.
And as teachers, that has been our cry and call for decades, is that you cannot have quality if you have large class sizes. You just cannot, because the more kids you add, the more complexity, the more everything. So the number one thing that could be done to make education its best would be smaller classes, for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. And then I also, it's hard to pick top three.
Yeah, I know it
I'm
is,
like,
right?
which one? But
Just go for
yeah, probably just more specialized stuff. Like every kid going through the exact
Yeah.
same curriculum isn't gonna work. Like
Yeah.
no matter the curriculum, it's not gonna work. Like some kids are slower,
Mhm.
some are faster, some learn like this, and I feel like there's not enough. Unless like obviously there are.
Like I feel
like,
like, you
yeah.
also go to like an art.
Yeah, I go to like
too.
I've gone to 2 really good schools.
Yeah.
I'm
you
currently
feel like since you go to an art school, do you feel like there like do you feel like there's more accommodation there for like for as a creative? Do you feel like there is
So I
there
feel-
something different?
so how my school is run is it's normal school, but then you have one class every day for an entire
Right.
year. Like throughout your entire years, you're in a 3-year art program. Outside of that, it's just regular.
It's just regular.
It's regular
school.
high school, and again, no offense to the school counselors, not the greatest. There's really there's nothing. Like I have a really
So
lovely
it's
art
basically
teacher.
the same structure
It's the same thing.
as a school, but it's
Yeah,
just,
it's like imagine taking an art class option, but it's just a 3 years. You do it every day.
oh
Yeah.
okay.
No. Yeah. So I don't go to like.
okay.
It's
Oh,
not
I
like
see
art in
now.
every class. No. I almost went to a school that was like that, where it was learning through art. I forget what it was called. It's on Stampede grounds.
Yes.
Do you know?
Yeah.
I almost went there. And I think that's
Oh
more
yeah,
of.
that you said there was
yeah,
only
that-
one kid. per
yeah,
class.
it wasn't
Or,
one
like-
kid
or,
per
like-
class. It was like 13 per grade. I'm like, no, thank you. But
do you have a third one?
my third one, this one's gonna be like weirdly specific. I feel like parents don't need to be involved.
In
Sometimes there's so much. I had a lot of problems. Teachers have to go through like everything they need consent for from the parents. Like, if you want to call, like if I'm trans, they cannot call you by that name unless your parents give permission. If a kid has a
Wait,
nickname,
actually?
yeah, if a kid has a nickname, that's
Dang.
fine. They can call him by the nickname. But as soon as it's trans, and they say it's for safety reasons,
Wait,
because
I know that not to be political again, but like Jason Kenney was like
yeah, that's
trans or
So-
whatever, and like
Yeah.
something about that I think had to do
Yeah.
with that.
So a lot of my friends, what you need to, if they say that it's for safety, because if you're actively calling that student, and let's say the parent doesn't know, or the parent is transphobic or whatever, and it's not safe to come out to them, another kid could slip, or the parent could slip, or like it just gets slightly complicated when you don't. Which, like, I understand it does get complicated if you can't tell the parents or whatever.
Yeah.
But like even like it just was weird where it's like, what do you mean you have to get written permission if you want to call me by a different name, but a nickname is fine?
That is weird.
Like if a non-trans kid had a nickname, it's fine, but as soon as it was a trans kid, it was weird. But no, I feel like
it's just weird how they separate the
yeah, and
Yeah.
they I don't think they've ever officially said that. I think it's a name change the parents has to know, but a nickname you have to. They've worded it weirdly.
okay.
But no, I
Wow.
feel like parents, especially for children, like school is the one thing where they have access support that most children go to, where they're around adults. Like I don't
Mhm.
think of any other place where
Right.
most kids have access to adults and stuff. So I feel like there should be a lot of support that not support, but access to support that maybe you can't get at home. Like there were so many things where like if I wanted to talk to a specialist or if they wanted to bring in a therapist, you needed parental consent. We need to call you by a different name. Oh, you need parental consent. Like it was just so many layers, and there was and if I told my teacher something, there were multiple times where I told him something and then he immediately had to go tell my parents, or he had the potential of getting fired.
Yeah, and that is true.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like insane, which like I understand.
Like the extent,
I
right?
understand the reason those things are in place, but I just sometimes people don't. My parents are lovely. To clarify, I love my parents, but for students who maybe have abusive parents or parents just aren't really a safe place for them. Like I know my friend who talked to a school counselor and was like, I feel uncomfortable at home. Like they were talking about home issues and stuff, but they were like, I'm safe. Like no abuse is going on. And they made that very clear. And they went home and told the parent. They're like, yeah, your kid came to us and was annoying you, because either it's not bad enough to warrant privacy or it's too bad that we legally have to tell someone about it. Like there's no way for me to be like, oh, I feel slightly uncomfortable like at home. Well, not me, but like, you know, there's no way for children to access support without their parents. Like children have no autonomy in that way. So I would change that of just like students being able to advocate for themselves without necessarily needing parental permission for everything.
I feel like it's the fact that there's also that specific barrier for like people.
Yeah, that one's weird. You're like I understand it from a safety perspective, but like also is that really the real reason why you're doing that? Like that's not the reason you're doing that.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
Did you go over? Yeah.
That's it. That's all my three.
Yeah? Okay.
I feel like there needs to be more opportunities to be creative. Even in creative classes, I felt like I was just following orders.
Right.
Or I was just doing what I was told, and it's like I always felt like I was like boxed in, because I've always been a creative person. I've always wanted to let that out, but even in like for example, I was in guitar class in grade 10, and we never like learned how to do scales, nothing. He just taught us how to play songs.
You had guitar class? You had guitar as like an option?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Dang, lucky.
Yeah.
What? You'll not have that?
No,
Like,
I had that in like grade 9.
You had band, right?
No.
No.
Wait, actually, no, we do have band.
You had band. You could do
Yeah.
guitar in band.
Well,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
it
Oh,
wasn't
for-
like you played like guitar in band. It was like guitar class.
Oh, that's sick.
Everybody had
Oh,
guitars.
that is
I
so
thought it was
sick.
just in band. No.
No.
Going back to that really amazing teacher, we should have him on sometime. But he got around that and he did a Spark project, which I think should be mandatory, where he was like, do whatever you want. Like, just tell me what your goal is. Where I was
Right.
like, oh, I want to draw this thing. And then somebody else was like, oh, I want to do this. Or like, oh, I want to do a research on like this thing. And he did a Spark project. And that's what he
Yeah.
called it. Was like, what was your Spark? What do you
Yeah.
want to do for an option
I
class?
had an amazing science teacher in junior. Shout out to Mr. Carr if you see this. But basically it was science class. But even though it was science class, at the very beginning of, because I had him for like, I think like maybe 4 years like straight, like it like from 7 to or like 6 to, I think. But basically the start of every like school year, he would do this thing where he would give out a topic or whatever, and you could make any sort of presentation. Like you can make video, you can make a documentary, you can make a poster, so you could present like on this topic in any way, and you got to choose kind of like the topic you wanted to do. So like one time I did like something about like, what are those self-driving vehicles or whatever?
Yeah, they're just called that.
Yeah,
Self-driving
yeah,
vehicles.
that's what they're called.
That's what they're called.
But anyways, I did like a video on that, and it was like he would just give us like sort of creative freedom in that, and I just thought that was like, that's what made me kind of want to like gear towards like film or like making videos and stuff like that, was he gave me that opportunity to be able to just like, oh, you can just like interpret it in your own way and then just present it. And I just thought that was amazing, because it was just like such a great opportunity.
And a lot of teachers will do that now.
Mhm.
That's a very powerful learning tool. Like,
yeah.
I've done a lot of classes where we call it either Genius Hour or Learning Hour or Creative Hour, and kids can choose what they want to study, how they want to study it, how they want to present it. And that's where you see some of the best learning come out, because, they can work to their strengths and play in areas they don't usually do. And you see amazing things come out of that. So that's, again, another area where I think if teachers could have more input into curriculum,
Uh-huh.
we would be pushing for more of
More of
that,
that.
as opposed to some of the memorizing and the spiel it out on a test and then forget it kind of stuff that's mandated. We would move the curriculum, I think, much more in that way more often.
Yeah, going back to Vicky,
Yeah.
we didn't finish
What are your
your
two
point
others?
before we all
I wish, like, if I could change another thing, I feel like public schools, because I only went to public schools and never went to like art school or science school, but
yeah.
public schools don't really. I feel like there's not a whole lot of regard for safety for the kids. I wouldn't know because like I am trans, but I wasn't out when I was in school, so I'm not too sure about like how things like bathrooms are. You're not
I
looking
can
too
talk on
happy
that
about
one.
it.
That one. Yeah. So being trans in school is an experience.
Yeah.
That's the thing. The bathroom, like, there's just so many. The teachers are not educated on it, which, like, they're so stressed. Like, it's like, I don't
Right.
blame the teachers. It's just that, like, as a trans student, like, I've had kids like yell out slurs in the middle of class, and the teachers not know what they were and just go on with it, or like they themselves have done things like they're just not educated
Oh
on
my
it. And
God.
then, like, there's just so many layers to it. And gym class is hell. I've never met a trans person who liked gym class. It is none of us are. That is not like, they had me changing in a storage closet, which, like, there is a problem,
Stop.
which, like,
Storage
isn't the school's
closet.
fault, because, like, infrastructure obviously has been built for,
Right.
like,
Yeah,
that,
but
like,
still,
there's
how
not
is
a lot of
storage
yeah.
closet functional?
or like, I felt like I had
No.
to teach every single one of my teachers of, like, here's how you deal with it, and then here are the pronouns, and like, there was a lot of, like,
Yeah, where, like,
there was so much education that you had to
you
do
just
just
see how
to,
that like falls.
the
instead
student,
of-
yeah, to, like, yeah. What about being closeted? Because that's also not fun. That's also
Wasn't
I've been
fun.
closeted, not fun either.
Yeah, it's not. It's not.
Literally
No.
put
They put me in a storage closet. Like, there's not a better metaphor for how they treat you. They literally put me in a storage closet.
Was there another point you wanted to add
Yeah.
onto like something you would change
I
about school?
think that's all I can think of.
I definitely think though, like safety, like
Safety.
Because I see a lot of like walkouts now. Whenever there's a assaulter who goes to the school and the school's
right,
kind of silencing victims from
Yeah.
speaking and stuff.
yeah.
See that a lot right now.
That is actually, yeah. There was like, I know at my school, like, not that I experienced it, but I know that there was people I know who were experiencing. It wasn't, well, sort of like borderline sexual assault at my school, and I remember, I went out of my way to go talk to the principal at the time, and it was just a very, very frustrating experience
Mhm.
because I remember so I talked to the teacher first, and then the teacher was like, okay, let's go talk to, and maybe this was not a good thing because I went to a male, but like, I trusted that teacher at the time. I was new to the school, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go talk to this teacher. And then the teacher was like, okay, let's go talk to the principal. And so I go and talk to the principal, and the principal basically finishes up whatever we were talking about, and he was like, oh, I think you should like create a club or whatever, and you should advocate on this sort of stuff. And yeah, I think you would be amazing to do that. Like, I think you could create an amazing club. And I'm like, you're just like putting this back all on me. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Oh,
Like,
you were sexually
students-
harassed. You have to put in the
Yeah,
work
yeah,
to undo the harm.
You have to go make a club now. You gotta like put in the work to like. That doesn't make any sense. Like, there's no like nobody helping you out. Like,
hmm
I was just so angry about that. Yeah.
Like in elementary school, I was abused like in school by another student, and there wasn't. I feel like the narrative around it is very
right.
it's very. I was raped by a woman who was only 1 year older than me and was in my classes and stuff. And nobody noticed. It was like in the bathroom, and then I would come back to class, and nobody noticed anything of like none of the teachers. Which again, a teacher teaching 35 kids, how the hell are they supposed to notice anything? But like, there's not. Teachers can't pay attention to
I'm
what
sorry
is
that
their
you
teach-
went through
Yeah,
that.
it's
Like,
fine.
that's
For sure.
But no, there was like, there's no way, like, there was no teacher that noticed anything because they're so distracted and they're so stressed that like kids aren't.
And
And-
you thought
yeah.
it was not a
No,
about it
absolutely
either,
not. I thought
right?
it was normal, but there wasn't. And I feel like also in the curriculum, we need to have more early consent talks
Yeah.
because shockingly, just because like consent isn't a dirty thing to talk about, it's very important. If
It is
somebody
extremely
had been like,
important.
oh, when you say no, that means like no. Like,
And
yeah.
as a teacher, you know, I would say, or I would put in, you know, that's horrible that happened to you. But what we're even allowed to talk about
Yeah.
in terms of that is mandated. And so, you know, we can't just come in one day and say, class, even if we think it's needed, class, I think we need to have a talk about consent, or we need to talk about, you know, anything to do with, particularly anything sexual.
Mhm.
But we don't have the authority and the ability
Mhm.
to decide those things. Those are decided for us. And so it's off, and again, that's something that maybe students don't know, is that what we can or cannot say is mandated by the government and by our school boards.
Mhm.
And so even if we want to have some of those conversations, you know, we aren't just free to do that. And then there is not a lot of training for teachers
Right.
Yeah.
for those things,
That's
right?
true.
I mean, we get some workshops, you know, in an afternoon
Yeah.
here or there, but so for teachers often, especially the younger teachers or those without a lot of experience, or for any number of reasons, we may not know how to respond to
Yeah.
some of those things too.
Yeah.
So that is an area I would agree with you where
Mhm.
where we need to have maybe either more autonomy or more training, and that's something that could come from students,
Mhm.
you know, when we're talking about curriculum.
Yeah. Going back to the safety thing, I was gonna talk about my school, but like, I don't know, it was kind of weird. Like the end of last semester, like there was like stabbings, like the parking lot. There was like lockdown. There's like I don't know, some not a shooting, but like somebody brought a gun to school. There's like a whole bunch of stuff happening, and like nobody knew what was happening. Like I didn't like this never ended up telling us what exactly happened in those situations. But I think it's just crazy that like I'm telling like other people at other schools, oh yeah, like we had like a stabbing over here, we had another thing happen over here, and they're like how do you feel safe? And I'm like, honestly, don't know, because like I'm not even aware of what's happening. And then what are like the precautions and like, you know, what are like are like schools go like are they trying to protect kids? Like how are they like where are the measurements? You
And
know?
I think they are. I think, you know, when you talk about a 30-year career, that's something we did not have 30 years ago.
right.
You know, or not, even if they were, not to the extent that they are now. And so this is new for teachers too, you know,
Okay.
where they're trying to train us on what do you do if a student comes in armed. You know, that
Right.
wasn't an issue, you know, in my previous 20 years or
Mhm.
whatnot. And we do have that, and we do have it even at the very young grades, like, you know, the elementary schools. We have kids coming in, you know, with different kinds of things that they're using as weapons and whatnot. And one of the issues that we're having that isn't talked about at all is teachers being injured.
right.
We have every year more and more and more teachers being assaulted in their classrooms, and we're we have a mechanism where we can report that, but it just is a piece of paper that goes into a file that doesn't really go anywhere.
Yes.
And so, I've personally been assaulted by students,
Right.
multiple times. And
Sorry to hear that.
oh, thank you. But it's again, it's this ability for teachers to be able to speak out,
Yes.
and we're not allowed to do that. And because we're not allowed to do that, just to speak freely to the public or to anyone, there's all these things going on that people just don't realize.
Yeah,
and it's dangerous. It's dangerous for the students, but there's also, it's becoming dangerous for teachers too. And we get very little real support for that. There's paper to fill out, but very little that goes from there.
yeah.
What would you want? Ideally, if that happened, what's hypothetically, what would you ideally would have want to have happened?
Well, there needs to be something where there's accountability, right?
Right.
Because, like you were saying, with what happened to you, and you were told make a club,
Yeah.
right? and unfortunately, very often, and not every, I'm making broad statements here. It's not always the same, but very often it's like that for teachers. It's like, well, what are you going to do to make the classroom safer? And what are you going to do? It's like, well, I'm physically afraid of this child. They are coming in every day. They have free reign. What do I do? And it's sort of so it's almost the equivalent of that. Like, well, you as teacher, go ahead and make the classroom safer. Well, how do I keep that child from bringing that weapon in? How do whatever. So
Right.
it's what we need is, we need to talk about it. We need to acknowledge that it's happening, because anything you don't acknowledge, you can't fix, right?
Yes.
So that's the number one thing. We need to be allowed to speak out and speak truth about what's happening in classrooms. And once we can do that, then we can sit down and say, okay, so what's needed? Well, probably smaller class sizes, probably more counselors, probably more psychologists,
Good
probably
communication as
communication,
well.
community. But nothing can happen until we're allowed to at least speak about it and let it be known that these things are happening, because teachers are being assaulted in huge numbers. And I know in the States, teachers are starting to come forward and report it, and they're losing their jobs because they report it.
Wow.
So, I mean, we need to be able to speak about it before anything else can happen.
I had no clue that was happening.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Nobody
like,
does.
yeah.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
And because everything is a lid on.
They're like silencing, and I want to reflect back on like previous points about how there's like no proper way, like a school, if any incident, let's suppose, happens, they don't know how to address it. Like
No, we
whenever
don't.
I'm in, like, we both went to same school, and whenever anything like stabbing or whatever happened, I would see that the emails are going to our parents first. They're
Yes.
not even talking to
Yeah.
us. They're not even explaining anything to us, but they're just so eager to tell our parents that, oh, your child is safe, don't worry. Like, at least tell us what's going on. There's no like communication, no nothing. And then the rumors just start spreading,
Well, that's
like
it.
assumptions and all that.
What about you? What are your top three?
One of my things was that I had watched there's TikTok videos that are minutes long, where they teach something that you learn in school, and there's so many comments or people who are talking about it, how they learn what people are teaching them for the past 12 years in that 1 minute video. And I'm not blaming the teachers on how they're teaching or anything like that, but I mean, I don't know who else to kind of point that at the time. But if you're learning from a TikTok video from a minute on algebra, I feel like it's also a very specific way that teachers want you to learn, or not teachers, but whoever that wants you to learn the specific way, or it doesn't count or whatever. And I feel like not everyone's gonna learn or understand that way. And there's so many situations in science or in math where I go on watching a video from a different teacher or somebody else teaching somewhere else, and I'm like, oh, that makes so much more sense, and now I completely understand. But I still have to do it a certain way, like that school wants me to, and I feel like that's kind of silly to learn it like that.
Waste of time.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of things that we're learning, if we're gonna learn it so fast, I had mentioned that before, learn it so fast, it's irrelevant to learn. It makes you kind of you don't have much more encouragement or excitement or motivation to go to school just to learn something. You're gonna forget. What are you doing here? I don't know. And then I think I would change something like what we are learning, like how relevant is learning every single book Shakespeare wrote.
Wait, that's true.
I'm just saying
That's so
because
true.
I mean, okay, like he has wrote interesting and it's like good for LA, you know, something to read. And but it's the way that they're describing it as like the Shakespearean language, but Shakespeare did not translate that to English. They're making this themselves translate to
Yeah.
English. So how much can you trust on that? And then the things that we do learn that might be relevant, like anything political or something like racial, or like books written by, it's like, who's that written by? It's written by a white woman on a perspective of a black person back then. I feel like that's really kind of like, what am I
Weird.
learning here as well? Like, I'm not learning it from the actual
And the fact that like
people.
they like encourage you to read books like that have like slurs in them, and then it's like,
And then they go, oh, I have to read this for educational purpose. No, you don't. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, that
I don't
annoys me. The white
I don't
teachers
support that.
To Kill a Mockingbird. Do you have that?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I don't
Oh
know.
my
You
God.
not to the N word.
It's
like, you
literally
don't have
not that
to.
hard to just be like, N word. Like you don't
like, you
actually
don't
have to
say
like you don't actually like
it.
it's so
oh my
easy.
God.
Yeah, I just feel
Yeah.
like a lot of things like that. Like, we're putting so much focus on a lot of things that are like the past, or like, I mean, I definitely support learning about the past, and that has like done lots of things for us in the future, but we don't talk about
Mhm.
anything that's going to happen now. We're not going to talk about anything that's happening
In the
later
present,
on. We're
yeah.
only talking about things that happened way back then, and there's still like, how accurate is that information that we're learning? Like,
Exactly.
if I take this information I'm learning in school and I go research it on my own, like, things are not adding up, and I don't know how much I like trust what I'm learning in school and why I'm putting so much effort into
I
that.
think
biased
it's-
education. It's
yeah.
like really.
Well, and then that again comes back to curriculum, right?
Yeah.
And if they would let students and teachers have some say in curriculum, maybe there could be some moves there, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to curriculums that are created by people who don't teach
And I think that would be my
and aren't learning.
exactly. And I think that would be my third point then, is that we go for 12 years in school and we're learning exactly what they want us to learn. But I feel like at a certain point, especially in high school, when you're trying to like make you pick your own options now, we shouldn't have to be doing all this other stuff that people are not going to go down that certain path, like science. If you're not doing anything to science, like, I feel like that should be an option, because now you're just being forced into it, and now you're not going to like it. I feel like
Yeah.
if you
and
really
then it's
have
just
an
gonna bring down your
interest-
average.
yeah, and you're like, they're
Yeah.
telling you need to do this, you need to do this, and then as soon as you're done high school, you're like, oh, you're on your own now, but you've been telling me what to do for the past 12 years, so I don't know. That's my thing.
Yeah, like why do I need math for an arts degree? Like, come
Yeah.
on, please don't force me down that path.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also feel like with options, like options annoy the hell out of me, because I'm really glad I got to go to an art school, because I get to do art for a 3-year program. It's not like, oh, I have to choose 4 options a year that I get to do once, where it's like, how much can you actually teach me in 4 years? Like, I feel like you should have an option to be like, oh, I want to do like film, and be able to have like 3 years of intensive like learning about that, even if it's self-guided. Teaching people, I feel like that's also something, is teaching children how to self-guide themselves.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. And a lot of good teachers, do try to do that. I mean, teaching is wonderful, that you can be creative and you can help kids find their path and their way. And there are teachers, jumping somersaults and bending over backwards trying to do those things. It's just frustrating sometimes, because like it is for you guys, the system frustrates you. The system frustrates good teachers often too.
Right.
But there are teachers out there, doing their best to do absolutely amazing things for kids. But, sometimes our hands are kind of tied too.
Do you think there's like, is there any form of like a student sort of like voice or opinion into the curriculum, or
Into the formal curriculum right now, no, which I think is a way we need to go.
right?
I think we need teacher voices, student voices, parent voices. We need more voices going into the curriculum than just departments and governments. But in schools individually, yes, there's many schools now where we are trying to get the student voice and incorporate that as much as we can, and we're seeing powerful things come out of that.
Wow. Yeah. And I feel like this is even though we're not like here for school or anything, I feel like as like either former students or like people who are going to you're going to
You oldie.
post-secondary
You're an
or
adult.
who's graduating or whatever, I feel like this is sort of like a form of like, us voicing our opinion. And yeah, I think it's really important.
Well, I have to say, like, listening to all of you inspires me, because this is what we need. We need the young people who are experiencing the system and going through the system. We
Right.
need to hear and respect your voices,
Yes.
because you're the ones being impacted by it. So you guys give me hope.
And perhaps
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do.
perhaps we could ask Angelique for her 3 points on
Come here.
what she thinks about education.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's get everyone.
I want to change how close-minded the school is. Like, I don't know, cause like I never really had the option to really express my creativity, and a lot of the times. So
Yeah.
and I think also that we need to talk more about so like sex ed and stuff. Yeah.
That's
Oh
for
my God,
sure.
it's so
There's no
like,
education on that.
you see Instagram reels that teach you better than
That's what
how
I'm saying.
classes-
That thing as well. Yeah.
But
Now we do have to follow a curriculum on that, because
Yeah.
I've taught sex ed for many
Yeah.
years, and I would agree with you
Yeah.
that we need to open that up.
Yeah.
Sex
And-
ed as a trans
so-
person is the most ridiculous
It's-
thing.
Mhm.
Have you ever had to sit through a sex ed class? It's the most ridiculous thing as a trans person. It's so outdated.
Yeah.
Of like
Mm.
the curriculum, like our understanding of sex is like there's no reason. They're like, oh, we're simplifying it for children. You're like, there's no reason to be factually incorrect in your curriculum to simplify it. And there's not, I feel like the way they teach it is so one-dimensional for like sex ed. It's like, oh, it's like
Yeah.
this is what happened to women. And then like, did you ever get separated? Was that a thing?
Yeah.
Of, like,
I-
boys and
yeah,
girls,
I did that.
that's
Just
And if you-
even up to 2 years
Yeah.
ago, we were doing that, where the boys
Yeah.
go in one room and the girls go in another
Yeah.
room, and it.
I in my grade, I think like 9 or something class or 8 class, we didn't get separated, but then that caused for a lot of like inappropriate
Jokes,
comments
yeah.
between one another, and
Mm.
the
Taking it
feeling
serious.
of being like you just feel grossed out by yourself, like because of the jokes other people make.
And I feel like a lot of how it's gone, like the curriculum, what's it called, nurtures that kind of shame where
Yeah.
it's like we don't talk about anything soon enough. Like, why are we waiting until you've already hit puberty to talk about puberty? Like I got my period. I got my period when I was like 9. They hadn't told me anything. I'm like, I'm dying. Like I'm bleeding. Like what's happening?
Literally.
I'm like, it's not inappropriate to talk to children about what's happening to their bodies and certain things about consent when they're like, it should be preemptive. Like the fact that it's like, oh, we're telling you about it afterwards. It's like ridiculous to me.
Yeah, so like for us kids who are like experiencing, like we're still going through school or who have been through school or who are going to school, like what advice do you have for kids, you know, who are experiencing like, you know, learning disabilities or like all these experiences, you know, and especially like in this present time where we're
Where there's so
experiencing a
much.
lot, there's so much going
There's so
on.
much. There's so much.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and I think you guys, you know, what a lot of what you're talking about leans towards is you have to advocate for yourself.
Right.
Because when there are 35 kids in a class and one teacher and so much complexity and diversity, you know, you need to stand, and it's not easy to do.
Yeah,
you know,
it's
but you need to continuously say, I need help, I need this is what I'm looking for,
right.
you know, and advocate for yourself. And if you do have parents who are supportive, have them advocate for you, because you know, when it's overwhelming, unfortunately it tends to be the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? And it shouldn't be that way,
Right.
but when it's overwhelming, that's how it is. I would also say really connect as much as you can with your social group. You know, use them for that support. Use them for,
Yeah,
you know, those mental
peers.
health
Yeah.
things, your peers, you know, those conversations. Because unfortunately the system does not have enough people in it to support each student the way it should.
Right.
And so it's not the way it should be, but you know, turn to your peers, turn to those people you trust, and use them as that support.
yeah.
And I would also say in terms of the curriculum and whatnot, even if you can't make the changes you want to right away, keep voicing them. Keep doing what you guys are doing right here.
Right. Yeah.
These are the things that I wish. These are the things that really I struggled with. Because the more voices that come out and say these things, whether it's teachers or students or, just education advocates, at some point, we hope people will start to truly listen and respond. So what you guys are doing here is just brilliant too.
Yeah, I think
I have one more.
Oh yeah.
Go
ahead.
Same question, but for parents. What would you tell parents putting their children through school?
My number one wish for parents is be involved. Because with adults right now, they are so busy. And I totally understand that. But often, I've had many situations where I have parents calling me at the school and saying, my child won't listen to me. I'm putting you on the phone because they listen to you, right? And so we have parents who are trying to be their child's best friend, but they're not, or thinking they are, but they're not doing the hard job of parenting. And so I have parents bringing the kids to the school for me to discipline and for me to talk through the difficult things with, because they're not comfortable doing that as a parent. And that happens all the time. We're being put in that parental role by the parents themselves. And so what I would say is be involved with your child, be a parent your child, know what's going on with your child so that teacher and parents can work together as a team to support your child.
Right.
And I hate to say that, but a lot of parents are abdicating that role and they're just going, here, they're yours. And then when there's an issue, they come to us. But we need a team to help parent and work with kids. So I would say be involved with your children, parent your children, be a significant force in their life. Don't just drop them off at the school door and hope it's all going to be okay.
Right.
That would be my number one.
Yeah. So I think this kind of concludes our podcast. Do you guys have any other questions, anything to add or ask Donna?
I'm just wondering myself, are you guys surprised to hear some of this?
Yeah.
Because whenever I talk to people about what it's like for teachers, they're always like, really? And we need to get that out. So I appreciate you giving me that
platform
to speak about that, because when I retired, one of the things that all the teachers I was working with saying was, well, now that you're retired, maybe you can get out there and start to speak about this, because we'll get fired if we say anything. And so we need more platforms to be able to come out and say, this is our reality.
Yeah. It's actually crazy how only if you retire you can be able to say these things, but then
and you still have to be careful there too. But it is crazy. And so thank you for that platform. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I think this concludes the end of our podcast today. Thanks for watching. You can check us out for more at our website, creatordi.cc. We'll have more of our episodes coming out. They should be out now, I think, at this time. But anyways, thank you so much, Donna, for being our guest. Our first guest, actually.
Yeah.
So,
It was a pleasure. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Okay. So, I guess we're all saying bye now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.